bring great benefits to many people. However, they said, if your child sees for himself the sufferings of the world, he will leave the household life and become a Buddha, an enlightened one, who will roll back the veils of delusion from the world and become a spiritual teacher whose teaching will spread throughout the world. But the one Brahmin who held up one finger said that for him he had no doubt that the prince would become a Buddha. Now the father, being a ruler himself, naturally didn't want his son to become an ascetic spiritual teacher. He wanted him to become a ruler, the proper heir to his throne. And so the father did everything he could to prevent his son from seeing the sufferings of the world. He built for him 3 palaces, one for each season, according to the Indian climate. Each palace had lovely pleasure gardens, ponds, fountains, flower beds, and so on. The young prince lived in luxury, always attended by musicians, dancers, and singers. He enjoyed himself in the company of youthful playmates, singing, dancing, playing in sports. Then when he reached manhood, his father arranged for him marriage with the beautiful princess Yasodhara, and he lived happily with his wife in the palace. But when he reached his 29th year, he became increasingly reflective, more and more thoughtful. He began to wonder whether this was the ultimate goal of human life, pleasure, power, and fame, which were all transient and unreliable. Or he wondered, is there something more beyond this, something which is eternal and unchanging? His first encounter with the hard facts of life is told in the text in the form of a myth that expresses a real and powerful psychological awakening. According to this myth, up to his 29th year, the Prince Siddhartha knew nothing at all about aging, sickness, and death. His father had arranged to screen him totally from exposure to these facts, and so he lived in a totally illusory world in which these hard facts of life were completely hidden from him. Then, when he reached maturity, curiosity led him to wonder what life was like outside the palace. And so one day he ordered his charioteer to prepare the chariot for him, and the two went riding throughout the kingdom. And in the course of this outing, he saw 4 sights which determined his future destiny. The first sight he saw was that of an old man. As they went riding, he came across a man walking by the side of a road, bent over, leaning on a walking stick, his hair gray, his skin wrinkled, his teeth falling out, very weak. He asked his driver, "What is that?" The driver said, "That is an old man." He asked, "What is an old man?" The driver explained, "All youth eventually leads to old age. Nobody remains young forever, but as the years go by, eventually the hair turns gray, the skin wrinkles. One reaches a state like that. Am I subject to that also? You and everybody else, we're all subject to old age." Then, as they drove further, he saw a sick man lying by the side of a road, his body covered with sores, trembling and shaking, vomiting, without able to control his limbs. Again, the same kind of exchange went on. Now he saw for himself, for the first time, the fact of sickness. As they went a little further, he saw the third sight. He saw a funeral procession, 4 bearers carrying the coffin. Inside the coffin, he saw the corpse, the body lying still and lifeless. This was his encounter with the fact of death. And these sights aroused in him an understanding that shattered all of his illusions, all his hopes and dreams for the future. He realized that even though he now enjoyed the beauty and the glory of youth, that youth ends in old age. He saw that health succumbs to sickness, that life ends in death. And as these thoughts bore into his mind, his satisfaction with the luxury of the palace life fell away, and he became inwardly very dissatisfied, very discontent. Then he saw a fourth sight. This was a summoner, an ascetic walking for alms in the town, walking very peacefully and serenely, carrying an alms bowl. He approached this man, asked him who he was and why he was different from other men. And the ascetic explained to him that I am a recluse. I live in the forest. I lead a life of meditation, seeking a way to enlightenment, a way to deliverance from suffering. And when he heard these words, the prince now knew the direction in which he had to move. And so he decided to leave the palace and to follow the quest for spiritual truth, seeking a way out of the round of suffering, of aging and death, by entering upon the life of an ascetic. So one night, this was on the same day that his wife Yasodhara had given birth to his first son, Rahula. That night, while everyone in the palace was asleep, he left the palace, got onto his horse, and went many miles from the city of Kapilavatthu and stopped at the edge of a forest. There he removed his princely garments, replaced them with these stitched robes of an ascetic, cut off his hair and his beard, and he entered the forest, seeking a way to deliverance. At the time, in ancient India, there were many famous religious teachers who were known for their systems of philosophy and their schools of meditation. The young prince, the young seeker, we can now call the Bodhisattva, went to the best-known teachers. He mastered their philosophies, he practiced their forms of meditation to the highest point. His teachers recognized his eminence